Greetings and salutations, travelers, and welcome back to the Inn of Planar Crossroads. The following is a fan-based reading of the rulebook for the Pathfinder 2nd Edition playtest. All rights reserved to Paizo and any other proper legal owners. Thank you. Chapter 1: Basic Concepts. Pathfinder is a rich game full of nuance, from both a mechanical and storytelling perspective. Here are some of the basic concepts that are helpful to familiarize yourself with before running or playing a game of Pathfinder. Reading this book. Throughout this rulebook, you will see formatting standards that might look a bit unusual at first. These standards are in place to make this book easier to read. Specifically, the game's rules are set apart in text using specialized capitalization or italicization. The names of specific statistics, skills, feats, actions, activities, reactions, free actions, and some other mechanical elements in Pathfinder are capitalized. This way, when you see the statement, "A strike targets armor class," you will know that both strike and armor class are used with their rules meanings. Pathfinder also uses many terms that are typically expressed as abbreviations. If you're ever confused about a capitalization term or an abbreviation, you can always turn to the glossary or index found on pages 420 and 424 and look it up. If a word or a phrase is italicized, it is describing a spell or a magic item. This way, when you see the statement, "He is protected by shield," you will know that in this case the word denotes the shield spell, rather than a shield, the item. The descriptions of spells are found in Chapter 7, beginning on page 203, while magic items are found in Chapter 12, beginning on page 380. This book is divided into chapters that contain information for creating a character, playing the game, and building the game's world. Many of these chapters contain lengthy rules or stat blocks. Where appropriate, the explanation of the format of these rules or stat blocks appears before them. For example, the Ancestry section of Chapter 2, which begins on page 22, contains rules entries for each of the game's 6 core ancestries, and an explanation of these rules appears at the beginning of the chapter. Modes of play. There are 3 main modes of play in a Pathfinder game: encounter mode, exploration mode, and downtime mode. The different modes of play are discussed in more detail starting on page 290, but knowing the following basics before beginning a game is helpful. Encounter mode is made up of rounds, during which each player in turn can spend actions to advance the group's goals, whether the party wants to sneak past a crowd or defeat some enemies. This is the most mechanically rigorous mode of play and works best when running combat or when a situation changes from moment to moment. Exploration mode happens when the characters travel significant distances, delve into mysterious new locations, interact with non-player characters outside of combat, or simply watch for danger. In this mode, time moves at whatever pace the GM sees fit. Players still have opportunities to affect the game world, though in a much more free-form manner. Exploration mode takes place between encounters and often sets the stage for round-by-round play. Downtime takes place when the characters aren't facing any active threats. Downtime typically happens while the characters are within the safety and security of a settlement and allows them to train, employ a trade, and experience life beyond their perilous adventures. These 3 modes are distinct, but the game's flow between them isn't always clear-cut. It's possible that a day that starts with downtime will involve the exploration of the city's sewage tunnels, leading the characters to the secret base of a depraved cult, and then into an encounter with the cultists. The more you play the game, the more you'll see that each mode features its own play methods, but moving from mode to mode has few hard boundaries. Acting and effects. The main way that characters and their adversaries affect the world of Pathfinder is by spending actions and producing effects. This is especially the case in encounter play, where every action counts. During encounter mode, each player character gains 3 actions and 1 reaction to use each round. Each player character can also take any number of free actions. Rules elements that describe actions, reactions, or free actions carry special symbols to indicate this, as described below. Actions. Actions start with this symbol. The book displays a diamond with geometric square inside that are both filled in. You can use 3 actions on your turn in any order you see fit. When you use an action to generate an effect, sometimes this effect is automatic. Other times, actions necessitate that you roll a die or generate an effect based on this roll. More information about die rolling and its importance to the game is found in the Die Rolls section on page 8. Reactions. The book displays an empty diamond with the right and left points of the diamond emboldened. Reactions start with this symbol. Reactions are similar to actions in their effects, but are used differently. You can spend 1 reaction per round, and only when its specific trigger is fulfilled. You can use your reaction on your turn or another character's turn as long as the trigger is satisfied. Often the trigger is another creature's action. Free actions. Free actions start with this symbol. The book displays the action symbol, but unfilled in. Free actions follow the same trigger rules as actions, and like reactions, you can use them on your turn or on another character's turn. Unlike with actions or reactions, you can use as many free actions per round as you like, as long as their triggers occur. However, a specific trigger can trigger only one of a character's free actions. Activities. Activities are special tasks that you complete by spending 1 or more actions. Usually they take 2 or more actions and let you do more than a single action would allow. All tasks that take longer than a turn are activities. Spellcasting is one of the most common activities, as most spells require you to spend several actions in a sequence to create their effects. Once you spend the last action required, your activity is complete and its effects occur. A few activities can be performed by spending a free action or a reaction, such as spells you can cast in an instant. Activities that use 2 actions start with this symbol. The book displays 2 action symbols, one on top of another. Activities that use 3 actions start with this symbol. The book displays 3 action symbols, each on top of the other. Format of rules elements. In Pathfinder, player characters use rules elements to act or in response to the situation. Many are feats, which are mechanical elements that characters can access through leveling up or making certain character creation choices. Others are more basic elements of the game to which all characters have access from the beginning of play. Regardless of the type of game mechanic, rules elements are always presented in the following format. Entries are omitted from the game's rule text when they do not apply, so not all rules elements have all the entries given below. Actions, reactions, and free actions have an appropriate icon next to them to indicate their type. An activity that can be completed in a single turn has a number of icons indicating how many actions are required to complete it. Activities that take more than a single turn to perform omit these icons. When a certain level is required before the element can be accessed, that level is indicated to the right of the name. Rules also often have 1 or more traits associated with them. For more about traits, see page 110. The book then displays an example entry, giving the appropriate amount of actions displayed, the feat or action name, the level beside that, followed by the trait of that particular rule entry. This body of text would present the following: prerequisites, any minimum ability score, feats, proficiency rank, or other prerequisites you must have before you can access this element is listed here. The element's level is always an additional prerequisite. Frequency. This is the limit on how many times you can use an ability within a certain length of time. Cost. Any extra cost of materials to use the ability, for instance in spells that require special reagents, is listed here. Trigger. Reactions and free actions both have triggers that must be met in order to use them. The trigger is listed here. Requirements. Sometimes you must have a certain item or be in a certain circumstance to use an ability. If so, it is listed in this section. Below these is another text box divided by a thin line. This section describes the effects or benefits of a rule's element. If the rule is an action, activity, reaction, or free action, it explains what the effect is or what you must roll to determine the effect. If it's a feat that modifies an existing action or grants a consistent effect, the benefit is explained here. Also in this lower text section is special. Any special qualities of the rule are explained in this section. Usually the special section appears in a feat you can select more than once and explains what happens when you do. Die rolls. Rolling dice to determine a character's success or failure at a given task is a core element of the game. Pathfinder uses a set of polyhedral dice to accomplish this. Most important is the 20-sided die, often abbreviated as D20. Many rolls in Pathfinder involve rolling a d20, adding bonuses or penalties, and telling the GM the results, so she can compare it to the number representing the difficulty of the task. This is called a check. More about rolls, checks, bonuses, penalties, and other key elements of the game is described beginning on page 290, but the following basics are good to know. Rolling high is good. You want your roll's total to meet or exceed the threshold for success, which is called the difficulty class or DC. The DC is a number chosen by the GM if you're going up against a challenge in the environment. If you're rolling against a creature, you'll instead use a DC based on one of its statistics. More about difficulty classes on page 291. Rolling 20 is better. Rolling a 20 on the dice means you critically succeed, which often has a greater effect than normal. You also gain a critical success if your total meets or exceeds the difficulty class by 10 or more. More about critical successes on page 292. Rolling 1 is bad. When you do, you critically fail your check. This is even worse than a regular failure. You also critically fail if your total is lower than the difficulty class by 10 or more. More about critical failures on page 292. Your difficulty class. Often you roll dice against a difficulty class determined by the GM, but when a creature or situation is testing your character's ability, it attempts a check against a difficulty class based on the most relevant of your character's statistics. The DC of any statistic is 10 plus all the same modifiers you'd add to a d20 roll using that statistic. Modifiers, bonuses, and penalties. You can get the following types of modifiers, bonuses, and penalties on your rolls and DCs. More about modifiers, bonuses, and penalties can be found on page 290. Ability modifier. Almost all rolls are keyed to an ability score. Your ability modifiers are derived from your ability scores, as described on page 20. For example, a strength of 10 gives you a +0 strength modifier, while a charisma of 17 gives you a +3 charisma modifier. You add only one ability modifier to a roll. Proficiency modifier. For most of your statistics, your class and other character choices will give you a proficiency rank. When you make a roll, you add a proficiency modifier that depends on your level and your proficiency rank in the statistic or item you are using. You add only one proficiency modifier to a roll. You're untrained if you have little to no knowledge in the statistic or item. Your proficiency modifier is equal to your level -2. Unless your class or another choice you've made gives you a different rank of proficiency, you're untrained. If you've been trained in the statistic or item, your proficiency modifier is equal to your level. As an expert, you are highly trained in the statistic or item. Your proficiency modifier is equal to your level +1. At master rank, you've achieved world-class proficiency in the statistic or item. Your proficiency modifier is equal to your character level +2. If you're legendary, your statistic or familiarity with the item is so high that you'll go down in history. Your proficiency modifier is equal to your level +3. When you have a proficiency rank, you also have all lower ranks except for untrained. Thus, if you have master proficiency rank, you also have the expert and trained proficiency ranks, though you use only the highest modifier. Bonuses and penalties. Other bonuses and penalties come in several types. If you have more than one bonus or penalty of the same type, you use only the highest bonus or penalty. Key terms. As you navigate this book, it's helpful to be familiar with the key basic terms found in this section. For a full glossary of game terms, see page 420. Ability score. Each creature has 6 ability scores: strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma. These scores represent a creature's raw potential and basic abilities. The higher the score, the greater the creature's potential in that ability score. You can learn more about ability scores on page 18. Alignment. Alignment represents a creature's basic moral and ethical attitude. See page 16 for more details. Ancestry. An ancestry is the broad family of people that a character or creature belongs to. Ancestry determines a character's starting hit points, languages, speed, and senses, and it grants access to a set of ancestry feats. Armor class, AC. All creatures in the game have an armor class. This score represents how hard it is to hit and damage a creature. It typically serves as the difficulty class for hitting a creature with an attack. Learn more on page 16. Attack. When a creature tries to harm another creature, it makes an attack roll against the target's armor class. Most attacks use the strike action. See page 308. But some spells and other abilities are also attacks. Class. A class represents the main adventuring profession chosen by a character. A character's class determines most of their proficiencies, grants the character a certain number of hit points when they gain a new level, and gives access to a set of class feats. Classes appear in Chapter 3. Condition. An ongoing effect that changes how you can act or alters some of your statistics is called a condition. These often come from spells, but frequently occurring conditions appear on page 320. Feat. A feat is an ability that a character gains from their ancestry, background, class, general training, or skill training. Some feats grant an action, activity, free action, or reaction. Game Master, GM. The Game Master is the player who adjudicates the rules and controls the various elements of the Pathfinder story and world that the other players explore. A GM's duty is to provide a fair and fun game. She wants the other players to ultimately succeed in their goals, but only after much danger and many heroic trials. Golarion. Pathfinder is set on Golarion, a world with a rich diversity of peoples, filled with exciting locations to explore and deadly villains to challenge heroes of any level. Throughout this book, there are references to Golarion, most notably in the discussion of the deities that your character can choose to venerate. You can set your game in Golarion, or any other world of your choosing, using these rules to create a rich setting all your own. For more information on Golarion, see Pathfinder Campaign Setting Inner Sea World Guide and other books in the Pathfinder Campaign Setting line. Hit points, HP. Hit points represent the amount of punishment a creature can take before it falls unconscious and begins dying. Damage decreases hit points on a 1-to-1 basis, while healing restores hit points at the same rate. Learn more on page 294. Initiative. At the start of an encounter, all creatures involved roll for initiative to determine the order the participants act during combat. The higher the result of the roll, the earlier the creature gets to act. Usually you'll use perception for your initiative rolls, but you might roll some kind of skill check instead. Learn more on page 304. Level. A level is a number that measures something's overall power. A character has a character level ranging from 1 to 20, representing their level of experience. Monsters, hazards, and afflictions have levels from 0 to 20 or higher that measure the danger they pose. An item's level indicates its power and suitability as treasure, also from 0 to 20 or higher. Spells have levels ranging from 1 to 10, which measure their power and relate to a creature's ability to cast them. Non-player character, NPC. A non-player character is controlled by the GM for the purpose of interacting with players and helping advance the story. Perception. Perception means your character's ability to notice hidden objects or unusual situations, and it usually determines how quickly you spring into action in combat. Learn more on page 301. Player character. This is a character created and controlled by a player. Rarity. Nearly all elements of the game are associated with a rarity, that is, how often they're encountered in the game's world. Rarity primarily applies to equipment and magic items, but spells, feats, and other mechanical aspects of the game also each have a specific rarity. The majority of such elements are commonly found within the world, which means that most anyone can buy them, in the case of items, or access them in the case of feats, without any trouble. The common rarity, marked in black, is the default. The uncommon rarity indicates an element available only to those who have been initiated into a specific kind of training, grown up in a certain culture, or come from a particular part of the world. A character can't take these options by default. Specific choices such as class features or backgrounds might give access to certain uncommon elements. The GM can grant any character access to uncommon options if she so chooses. The level or type of element for those without levels is marked in red. Elements that are rare are particularly unknown or impossible to find in the game world. These elements appear in the game only if the GM chooses to include them. Rare elements are marked in orange. The unique rarity indicates an element that is one of a kind. This means that there's only one of them in the game's world. Artifacts, for example, are often unique. Unique elements are marked in blue. One appears in Pathfinder Playtest adventure Doomsday Dawn. Role-playing. Describing a character's actions, often while acting from the perspective of the character, is called role-playing. When a player speaks or describes action from the perspective of a character, they are in character. Saving throw. When a creature is subject to dangerous effects it must attempt to avoid with its body or mind, it can often roll a saving throw to mitigate the effect. You roll a saving throw automatically. You don't have to use an action or a reaction. Unlike most types of checks, the character who isn't acting rolls the d20 for a saving throw, and the creature who is acting generates the DC. There are 3 types of saving throws. Fortitude, to resist poisons, diseases, and physical effects. Reflex, to mitigate effects that you could quickly dodge. And Will, to resist effects that target the mind and personality. You can learn more on page 17. Skill. A skill represents a creature's ability to perform certain tasks that require training to master. Skills typically list ways you can use them even if you're untrained in the skill, followed by uses that require you to be trained in the skill. You can learn more on page 142. Speed. Speed is the number of feet that a character can move using the strike action. See page 310. Spell. Spells are magical effects generated by using an activity to cast them. Spells specify what they target, their effects, the actions needed to cast them, and how they can be resisted. Learn more on page 192. Strike. You can move up to your speed with the strike action. Stride. You can move up to your speed with the stride action, which appears on page 308. Strike. You use the strike action to make an attack. You can find it on page 308. Trait. A trait is an indicator that a rules element obeys special rules or has certain features. Often, traits have rules attached that govern how something works. Other times, they are indicators of how other rules interact with an ability, creature, item, or other rules element that has that trait. An index of all the traits used in this book appears in Appendix A, Traits, on page 414. Turn. During the course of a round, each creature takes a single turn. A creature can typically use up to 3 actions during its turn. Learn more on page 304. This content was made possible by the generous support of patrons and travelers like you. Thank you.